Pony Island is a game where you look at a screen on your screen, playing a game to get upgrades in order to play a game. It's one of those innumerable meta video games that come out ever since the rise of Steam and the indie game revolution, but what's special about this one is just how hard it beats you over the head with it all. Before even entering anything resembling gameplay, you first need to descend through the meta layer itself, getting the program to launch at all. Through coding-esque segments, you need to find a way to make the start button work, and then even the loading bar. Like many of these sorts of games, you're met immediately by a mysterious, unreliable ghost within the machine, some rogue program or trapped mind or simulation of a ghost of a mysterious computer programmer. And all this effort and conflict brings us to a game that sucks. You run with your pony and jump over hurdles. It is transparently a vehicle to progress the story, the type of game you'd see in a movie from the late 90s, and truly, it is not really different from that despite the fact that we can actually play it. We might be able to interact, but this game and the concept of its existence is a complete and utter fiction. The story, the interesting bits of gameplay, the actual game of Pony Island takes place anywhere but these levels. The in-game universe of Pony Island mutates itself in an effort to try and appease you, some sort of infinite fun machine made literally by Satan, not a joke, that comes at the cost of your soul. In each of these is the briefest flash of a 2D universe, projected on a fake screen onto your real screen, engaging in two different worlds at the same time and understanding how each feeds into the other. So then, when Daniel Mullins, creator of Pony Island, announced a new game, his fans were not very surprised at the twist. However, for everyone else who played Inscryption for the very first time, there were a lot of conflicting feelings. It was promoted as one singular experience, a roguelite deck builder that takes place in a dark, mysterious cabin, facing off against a shrouded man on the other side of the table. That promise alone, and those already existing fans of Daniel Mullins, gave it the push it needed to hit gaming YouTubers and streamers, the most important hurdle to clear in indie game advertising. The issue, however, is that this promise was delivered on a little too well. People loved Inscryption. Its atmosphere is inky and hollow and filled with this yearning for answers. Every element of this place seems intentional and almost alive, in some cases literally. Some of the very cards you play with speak directly to you. The card gameplay is almost heavy and precise in a way that most roguelite deck builders simply aren't. Card health is not designated by the 10s or 100s, but by 1s and 2s and 3s, each individual hit point being a magnitude more protection. Just one more can get you to last one more turn, and one more turn for one more card can be all it takes to take it all. The mystery outside of the card game itself draws you in too, making deaths not an abject failure but another chance to explore. Through close examination, you're able to find invaluable tools, literally tools. During the course of each new run, you can use them to scrape by moments that would otherwise be a death sentence, each small thing adding up to, eventually, winning entirely. In any other roguelite, this is the game, a game that seemingly everyone was more or less content with. However, if you explored that outside mystery, if you got everything you needed, and if you finally beat the game, you don't get to play it again. As everything comes together after beating the game and getting your prize, you are set yet again to be killed and recycled. However, in all roguelites with a story, there is a justification for the loop. That thing in this game, the man keeping you trapped, is now completely missing. However, rather than just an end to the game, you realize that you weren't playing Inscryption. Just like Pony Island, this game has two layers, a game nested inside of a game. It turns out there are 4 scribes, each with their own method of turning things into cards, each with their own styles, and, importantly, each with their own potential game. As video games have become more technical and as indie games especially have become more stylized, this segmented form of game structure has become more and more common, but segmented structure in general is core to the very design of video games. The most normal and widely accepted form of games inside of games is that of mini-games games where there are many smaller, simpler games inside the larger game that hosts them. Mario Party is one of the most famous series with this format. The macro experience is navigating around a board trying to get as many stars as you can before the end of the turn count. Somewhat randomized by dice rolls, but with decisions you make within that randomness having a significant effect on your ability to win. However, the biggest swings in winning odds exist when you're challenged to a mini-game, either earning or wagering anything from coins to power-ups to outright stars. While randomness is still sometimes a factor, you are never more in control of your circumstances as you are in these mini-games, and the results of them can have massive effects on the layer above. This segmented design doesn't just involve nested structures too. Cult of the Lamb is both a roguelite and a base builder, but never at the same time. Your goal in the game is ultimately to rise up and kill the 4 sibling gods with a stranglehold over the powers in your land. To do that, you need to both grow your own cult, giving you powers and allowing access to greater areas and tools, as well as venturing out into the realms of the gods, gathering resources, followers, and slaying each one when you've become powerful enough to do so. Each side of the game feeds into the other one, having gameplay function as a ping pong between the two to grow your power and abilities for your cult and yourself. The issue, however, makes itself known the more and more you play. Quite simply, you will almost certainly begin to prefer one side of the game over the other. In Mario Party, so long as you enjoy the macro game, the strategy of the board, having some mini-games you don't like is ultimately not a problem. Each micro experience lasts around a minute and is often so simple that even if you don't enjoy it, you can understand it and always have a fighting chance. By the minigames being subsumed by the larger experience, their friction is negated. In Cult of the Lamb, both experiences more or less share the same amount of complexity and substance. They are remarkably well balanced at pacing each other in fairness, with a slight amount of flexibility as well. You can lean somewhat into one side of the game more than the other as a crutch to make either the roguelite easier or to make the base building faster. However, the issue is that these two are inseparable. The game needs you to like both enough to keep playing. If someone doesn't enjoy the base building aspect, then much of the game will be cynically stuffing as many cultists as you can into a dying village in order to get just enough upgrades to beat each area. If you dislike the roguelite, it's even worse. Not only does it feel like a chore, but exploring is not easy. It's a chore that you can fail at, and if you do, your rewards are not only diminished, but you have to start from the beginning of each area again. There is an inherent friction between the two equally sized but separate parts of the game experience, and one that can undercut anyone's enjoyment of it in the long term. That all being said, despite the tightrope, the game is widely beloved. It is without a doubt a stylish, well-designed, well-considered experience. However, any time someone does have a problem with the game, the complaint is the same. One side is significantly more fun. Even for many fans of the game, me included, you tolerate half of it to enjoy the other. I love the base building aspect, while the combat of the roguelite is kind of mind-numbing as you go on. Despite all this though, my brain unmistakably registers both sides as Cult of the Lamb combined. Nearly every game has some sort of separation in its structure, but through things like overworlds, aesthetics, or general design choices, we don't register them as a series of minigames, but rather one whole experience. RPGs are one of the single biggest examples of this. While some exist seamlessly from level to level with the monsters just hanging around, turn-based RPGs especially have a world you walk through until you're sucked into a combat minigame via random or story encounter. In most cases, this structure works due to the simple fact that while both are kinds of gameplay, one is a dominant gameplay segment and the other is recessive. In turn-based RPGs, the main thing you play is the turn-based combat. The overworld exists to give cohesion to it all and to help tell the overall story, but you don't play the overworld, you simply travel through it. This game design decision baked into so many genres is largely a matter of efficiency and resources. RPGs are often vast, sweeping stories, taking sometimes hundreds of hours to complete, and the level of sprite work, or in the case of 3D games modeling it would take to design all these areas, at least in the past, was nigh impossible to fund. Players have an obvious preference towards one end of the side of gameplay, but unlike Cult of the Lamb, the parts that aren't loved are both simple and passive. You don't need to focus very heavily on walking around in the overworld, but if you stop paying attention to the roguelite half of Cult of the Lamb, you will be killed. For most games, especially ones in the past, it is simply easier and more efficient to block these things off, have the special moments be given the most attention and everything else be made as simple as possible while maintaining the veneer of the world that you're in. If aesthetic cohesion is maintained, then nothing more needs to be done. In this sense, these structures are antagonistic towards the ideal version of these game worlds. They're only present because infinite time and budget is not available, but like all other limitations in art genres, these decisions have become baked into the design itself, even when it's no longer become outright necessary. And, as an art genre progresses, there will be people that question the nature of structures, of tropes, of what they actually mean. While some games mend multiple dominant genres together, many forward-thinking artists have taken it a step further. They integrate that structure into the very universe itself. The story of Inscryption aggressively rejects immersion at every turn. Just like Pony Island, it is a video game whose setting is a video game. The moment you beat the first act of Inscryption, you're not met with a celebration screen, but rather a video database. These videos detail the game's backstory, one revealing that Inscryption is a game in the universe of Inscryption, one that did not exist anywhere but one single floppy disk, a floppy disk found by a YouTuber named The Lucky Carter. While there is more backstory about how the game was imbued with magical sentient characters, the origin of which was a set of cards on Hitler's corpse, let's just move past it, the actual plot of the game is one where everyone knows the material reality of what they are and where they are. They are in a video game, and all of them want to either control it or escape it. They are all in search of the old data file, one that would give them access to the magic powering this game, and, in PO3's case, allow them to spread the cursed version all across the internet using the Lucky Carter's PC. In this decision, Inscryption reveals an implicit layer of a game's story that is often ignored. While a game might be one whole experience, it exists within a container. The meta layer for a game is everything not meant to be within the game's world. UI, menus, non-diegetic music, the filter between us as players and the things in the world that bolster and inform our experience of it. Most video games do their best to pretend from a story perspective that this doesn't exist. Some games, especially meta ones, make active use of them or alter them for surprising fourth-wall breaking moments. However, an idea almost entirely unexplored is a game that exists only on the meta layer. Not a meta story, but a game that literally happens entirely above a game world. Basilisk 2000 is precisely this. The original Basilisk was proposed as an abandoned SNES RPG, one only available to play in the modern day via emulation. Booting up the exe file, you're not met with the game, but rather an emulation program. It is entirely fictional, but a surprisingly direct analog. It lacks the hand-holding and stylization that most games would include, having you search your own files to boot up the game. Beyond this though, it is more or less a regular spooky abandoned game. You walk around too dark or too foggy corridors and forests, find strange things and people, and eventually get jump scared and then the game ends. Even then, the game can be experienced non-linearly. The meta layer of the emulator is not just there for a set piece, you can actually utilize it. Due to the game's unfinished nature, there aren't things that connect the various rooms, and so you navigate to new ones at your leisure using save states. I said that you get scared at the end, but it happening at the end is entirely unnecessary. It simply exists in the final save state available to you. You can experience the game in whatever order you choose, as many times as you wish. That being said though, the meta aspect of this game stops there, a cool concept that would have been lost to the sands of time. Look, I'm obviously talking about this for a reason. Basilisk 2000 is the quote-unquote spiritual sequel to the original Basilisk, and also unfinished follow-up to an unfinished game. It's even further incomplete, however, as it is only interactable through a level editor. Like for the original Basilisk, the level editor is itself fictional, but even then, some people may not consider this a video game. While you can spawn yourself into the world, at nearly no point is the game given the entire screen. There is a big window mode, but you're made always aware that this is taking place in a layer above. 2000 has more required progress than the original game, but not through any traditional means. If it were to be defined as a specific genre, it would be a puzzle game. The list of all available areas is not given to you and needs to be directly entered by name via command to visit each place. As such, the only thing limiting you is your knowledge, and, importantly, the knowledge required to explore the game's depths cannot be found just by playing within the world. You're given direct access to a free cam, stats about each and every entity, descriptions, foliage and render distance controls. The elements of tension or difficulty that would have existed in the game are not present. Mood lighting can be disabled with a click, nothing can be particularly hidden from you. The quote end of the video game, while difficult to initially find, is as simple as clicking the minus button until the boss's health finally reaches 0. What's found in this experience is the exact opposite of what almost every video game is trying to do to you. As long as games have existed, people have imagined a world indistinguishable from reality, one where our wildest fantasies could come to exist at the snap of a finger, good or bad. While that might never come, the development of technology has allowed video games to closer and closer resemble a real world. Even for 2D video games, pixel art games, the tools now available allow even hobbyist developers to draw us into a world that has some semblance of real depth. The more details it has, the more intelligent the enemy AI, the more procedural the interactions with the environment. This complexity further and further lowers that implied wall, the screen separating us from the world we're playing within. Basilisk 2000 is dead set on making it impossible to forget that wall. A screen within a screen is a digital enforcement of the actual reality. Even within the bounds, we're not allowed to forget that there are bounds. This is a video game, one that is actually unfinished and actually unplayable as a whole. You complete questlines by clipping into the ground and speaking to a later version of the same character. You solve maze-like dungeons by moving through the walls and seeing its layout from the outside. While many meta games, and especially ARGs, are about a cursed development process, they all conveniently take place in a more or less functional world. Disturbing imagery is fit into the final product with fully modeled environments with triggers and animation work and a level of polish on par with the rest of the experience. Basilisk 2000 shares many of those elements, but with a level of concreteness to them that grounds you. It's not fully clear what elements are made by people and what elements are made by the supposedly advanced AI advertised on the cover, but what is made apparent is some genuine level of sickness on behalf of the game's lead developer. There are elements that, while none outright frighten you, give this creeping dread. Someone having these violent fantasies could have manifested them like this, in simple, low-effort assets hidden amongst the game world. Easter eggs put by someone disillusioned or the development team noticing it, delusional and venting while their psyche begins to slowly crack. And, through this flatness, we feel the weight of reality that didn't exist before. In a game about a creation cut short, only could existing within the tools of creation themselves give us so fascinating and intimate of an experience. This shift in depth may also be one reason why Inscryption wasn't the most beloved game by everyone. It is generally highly favored in the top charts of many people, but just like Cult of the Lamb, it suffers from the fact that people simply like one section a lot more than the others. And, even further, it was the section that specifically wasn't meta. A game exactly like this, Act 1 of Inscryption, has never existed before now. This specific mix of heavy yet simplistic card gameplay, the dark tone, the escape room-esque segments. The mystery being spun was intriguing, but finding the answer came at the direct cost of the game people actually wanted to play. Though fans of Daniel Mullins could have expected this, and while many people didn't expect it but ended up loving the game as it was, it's hard to disagree with people who were upset that Inscryption, the card builder roguelite that takes place in a dark cabin, was not Inscryption. The moment you open that door and step through, you're given answers to questions you may not have even wanted to ask if you knew where they'd lead to. The depth of the world you entered into is literally made flat, rebooted into the original version of the game, one in a retro setting, a story irremovable from the meta layer. You become aware of the screen, old artifacting literally baked into the art style, and with that the borders of your screen, your room, and yourself. Inscryption is not the first game to do this, to nest one entire game within another, but it has almost always functioned in the opposite direction. Video games are fascinating as a medium for many reasons, but one of the most curious is just how much it has had to evolve, slowly and in real time. Art mediums all see advancements along the progression of technology, but video games more or less are the progression of technology in the digital age materialized. Any advancements in 3D modeling, texturing, processing speed, storage, graphics, animation, artificial intelligence, procedural generation, real-time physics simulation, all of it forms materially in these worlds we create and explore within. Their style puts them in the era they were made through their limitations alone, often consuming the nuances of the art direction entirely. Just as important though is how effortless it is to run what used to be cutting-edge technology. The meme that Doom can be played on anything is a testament to this. From calculators to pregnancy tests to Microsoft Excel to video games absolutely not designed to run other games on. While Garry's Mod and other sandboxes with importable assets can do it, perhaps the most insane example is Doom being run in Minecraft. Specifically, run entirely on Redstone. No command blocks, no mods, no plugins, and no data packs. Minecraft in general has become known for the fact that you can actually compute things in it. Redstone, what initially might have been considered an odd thing to add to the game, has enough complexity to make logic gates and as such small computers. The game itself poses limitations that are not passable: the delay between transmissions, the physical space it takes up, the combinations of valid redstone placements, and that leads to this only being possible to generate around 1 frame every 20 seconds. And yet, that doesn't change the fact that technology was reinvented in a survival game world from first principles, scratching up every small advancement and realization about how this universe works to create things never feasibly imagined. We have reinvented computer technology in a world created by computers, and those computers being able to run some of the earliest examples of video games, ones we used to have trouble running ourselves. The same progress has come in the form of file size. Super Smash Bros. Brawl, for example, housed a vast collection of classic Nintendo games, but only let players play for limited periods of time. Yes, Nintendo could not part with games nearly entirely inaccessible through legal means all the way, but just enough to give you a few minutes on each. Hilariously enough though, at least in the case of Brawl, hackers found a way to disable the time limits, and, to everyone's shock, they found that all 14 classic games were simply there in full. You could play the whole thing. The original Star Fox 64 was 64 megabytes. Every corner was cut and sanded down to make that game even possible to exist. A decade later, and an entire suite could just be forgotten on the 10 gigabyte storage of a Wii game disc. In fact, we didn't even need to wait that long. In 2001, Nintendo did the same thing in the original Animal Crossing, this time without any restrictions. 19 NES games stored for use on a piece of furniture like any other in the game, a home decoration, an afterthought. Animal Crossing as a series began well into the era of 3D gaming, but was near the beginning of a wave that really fired up in the 2000s, a focus on game worlds that in some way reflect reality. While the game was incredibly cartoonish, life in Animal Crossing was significantly more mundane than its often action and fantasy-focused peers, with other key games near the start of the wave like The Sims releasing a year prior at the start of the millennium. The PS2 released that very same year, and with this new leap into better processing and graphics came an ability to try and depict our actual world and even more than just gameplay. Open world, both as an overarching genre and just as a smaller level design choice with more defined structures, sprung up due to that higher power. While Grand Theft Auto 3 shattered the ceiling for the new genre's success, the first game to earnestly capture what we think is the modern open-world video game was the original Shenmue in 1999. And, in one of the first fully realized depictions of a fictional city we could actually explore ourselves, 26 years before this script was written, you were able to go to the arcade and play a game within a game. From the moment we were able to make these worlds resemble ours, we made a world that could make a world. While this wasn't the first ever time, it has become relatively common practice to do it ever since. You can play Doom 1 and 2 and Doom Eternal. Wolfenstein: The New Order lets you play a version of the original Wolfenstein 3D in one of its nightmare sequences. Donkey Kong 64 forces you to play the original to get through a level. The commonality between all of these, though, is that they're mostly placed as a novelty. In this cutting-edge mark of game design and graphical progress, here is a simple little flat thing you can mess around with. In this entire exploration though, this contrast in the shape of video game history, one of the most interesting choices one can make is to integrate this depth and size into the core of the game itself. Spore, depending on how and who you saw play it, may only be in your memory as a game where you walk around as a monster shaped very eerily like a dick, but the main concept and design of the game is rather ambitious even now and especially for its time. The game begins with a zoom in from space, past a sun and following an asteroid as it hits a planet suitable for life. You're born into a top-down Katamari-esque game, eating food to grow so you can eat bigger food to grow even bigger. Evolution is core to the game as a whole, and unlike a lot of games to explore the concept, Spore itself evolves to match that growth. From the simplicity of 2D, eating and growing enough finally grants you the ability to step on land, leading to the layer of Spore you are likely familiar with, and on the ground, over-the-shoulder survival tribe builder. You're given the option to either be sociable with or aggressive with other species, leading in either case to further and further growth. Each new evolution advances your entire species, accelerating you even further into the tribal stage. Suddenly you're no longer over the shoulder, but rather top-down again, now controlling your entire tribe in the style of a real-time strategy game. Next you reach the civilization stage, in the position of one nation-state in your species vying for control in the style of more overarching RTSs, like, fitting enough, the Civilization series. And finally, your nation taking dominance over the world leads to the technology required for the space stage, exploring well beyond your planet, searching for the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. After first seeing that asteroid crash into your home planet, you're finally seeing life from that wide-angle lens, and even further beyond. Spore, despite its many flaws and relatively shallow gameplay, manages to intertwine the evolution of life with the evolution of video games themselves, not just the scale but the design growing larger and more complex with every pull of the camera. Spore was one of the first games to really tackle this concept from an artistic angle, and while it came out 17 years ago now, the amount of games to try anything like this again are surprisingly few. One of the most prominent examples is, somehow, FNAF World by Scott Cawthon, a game that seemingly only I find interesting in the modern gaming sphere. The nature of this game is incredibly odd even within the context and theories of the Five Nights at Freddy's series, bars, but like Inscryption, there is an awareness that this is a video game from a number of the creatures trapped within it. You navigate the world primarily with the overarching map, but to beat and reach some of the most difficult enemies and areas, you need to make use of the game's glitch layers. These look entirely different from the regular overworld, partially because the game's overworld graphics were literally entirely redone, abstracting the image of Freddy and the world around him. You're able to not just go one layer down, but multiple, the game becoming more and more unrecognizable until, if you go too far, you reach Old Man Consequences. This is a place that is at the very bottom of the game's code, inescapable outside of outright closing the game. While this is mostly just stupid and silly, if we take simplicity as a mark of video game history, peeling back each layer of progress as we progress deeper into the pits of the game's code, Old Man Consequences feels like the layer of knowledge that cannot be crossed. Like we cannot know what happened before the Big Bang, we cannot go further back than the simplicity of the very first interactable worlds. In our search for unfindable knowledge, we're given a very fitting punishment, a softlock. These two games, FNAF World and Spore, both tried very unique ideas and landed them with mixed results. They are both fascinating to look back on, but with the obvious rust that their age has shown. In my search for a game that properly encapsulates this feeling of video games' progress being in the world, there is exactly one game that truly connected. And, quite honestly, it has struck me to my core. Deltarune has a weird relationship with video games. Scratch that, Toby Fox has a weird relationship with video games. While many developers have used the meta layer very explicitly, either briefly breaking the fourth wall or making games entirely within it, both Undertale and Deltarune take the meta layer and interweave it with the world you're directly engaging in. The game begins with you, the player, being explicitly talked to, presumably by the scientist W.D. Gaster. He as a character has never been anything more than a ghost within the machine up until this point. While we as a collective know about him, the chances of seeing any fragment of his existence in Undertale was extremely low, and what we did receive was hardly any trace whatsoever. Toby Fox's nostalgia for the old era of gaming constantly shines through in his works, from the art style to the secrets to the themes, but Deltarune, the game he had been fixated on making before Undertale was even an idea, brings it to light more than ever. In each chapter is a character that breaks the fabric of the game's nature, but even more interestingly, an egg. Literally just an egg. The process of getting it in each of the released chapters changes dramatically, but among them is one far different from the others. You're given the egg each time by a man. This man seems to have been forgotten by everyone and everything, only ever able to speak from behind a tree that obscures him. You find him through invisible seams in the game, in places that nobody would think to look unless they were explicitly trying to find secrets. And, after a brief exchange, he gives you an egg to remember him by. While the process for finding the egg in every other chapter is relatively simple, Chapter 3's is essentially unfindable. It is a series of incomprehensible steps with no clues to connect them, intentionally arbitrary and complicated in a way that no modern secret in a game ever would be normally. It ends with you, in the middle of a battle, simply walking with your heart to the left, and suddenly finding yourself here. Welcome to Forgotten Island. This is a World Heritage Site. The Chapter 3 Egg Room, unlike any other, is a retro world isolated from the rest of the universe. While you played retro games in this chapter, never has the world of Deltarune taken on so different a style from its own. This island seems to be a callback specifically to Chris's past, as the entire chapter takes place in a realm controlled by their old family television. This nostalgia for the mystery of old games doesn't just land on Chris, though. In the depths of an ARG Toby ran for charity that took place before Chapter 3's release, we get insight into Noelle's fascination with video game secrets. She, while only barely noting her fascination in-game, has an online blog entirely dedicated to them, recounting her long hours spent modifying and experimenting in her favorite games, looking for glitches, exploits, and most importantly, Easter eggs. Deltarune is a game meant to be locked on one linear path dictated by fate, but its nature as a video game seems to leach out things between the seams, inconsistencies and secrets that keep putting into question if things are as straightforward as they're meant to be. However, so much of this is represented specifically by retro games. In the world of Deltarune, a game entirely cast in pixel art, their games are simply pixel art but even older, with simpler color schemes and larger pixels. This duality, the games inside the video game of Deltarune, casts a very odd branch of possibilities. Either we're simply seeing a 2D pixel art representation of the real fictional world of Deltarune, or that Deltarune is actually a video game and these retro games are directly connected to their world, a frame within a frame, but one that is only limited to their televisions arbitrarily. So then, what actually stops Chris from stepping inside one of these screens? And what stops the things inside from simply stepping out? While the NPCs in the lower part of the island mostly speak specifically to and about Chris, when you go up to meet the Forgotten Man, his dialogue is incredibly interesting. Once upon a time, the whole world looked like this. Do you think so? Really? You believe something so absurd? I'm happy to hear it. Let me continue. Well, the world changed. Society was developed. The earth was covered in water, dinosaurs appeared, an ice age. Actually, there still are dinosaurs. Is it mixed up? In any case, this island is the only place left I can talk. Do you understand what I'm saying? Funny, I haven't the faintest clue what it all means. But one day, this island will disappear too. This exchange has utterly fascinated me. As is the nature of Deltarune, it's impossible to tell whether the man is talking to Chris or rather talking to you in the form of the heart. But what he has to say feels magical to me. The man remembers two different kinds of evolution. One of our world, of society and dinosaurs and an ice age, alongside the evolution of video games. Man is not just talking about all video games, but also this world and this island specifically. It is modeled after the style and limitations of Deltarune's oldest ancestors, and it is possible that the actual world that Deltarune is in evolved not in the same way as us, but literally alongside the development of video games as a whole. This universe is not necessarily a video game, Deltarune, but the evolving core from which all new worlds sprout, with Deltarune being just one universe constructed by Gaster for the sake of experiments. This seam in the wall takes Chris inside of one of the actual worlds their television used to show them, like a black and white film, but one still living. And yet, this world is shrinking and shrinking. Once a universe, it is now an island, as less and less attention is brought to this era of time. It's as if it's too unstable to exist on its own anymore, unable to capture the attention of humans on the outside entirely on its own, now only able to exist in a larger universe. One more complex, one with more depth, one closer resembling our own reality. They can fit neatly within a screen inside of a screen, but nothing more. They are now secrets, Easter eggs, small enough to be forgotten even by the people that put them there. This world was only findable through a series of horribly cryptic steps, modeled after the very first Easter eggs to ever exist. This trend started not as a way to hide cool things in games, but rather to hide someone's actual name. Developers used to be entirely uncredited as a way to keep their bargaining and labor power suppressed, so proof of their existence would be hidden from the higher-ups in steps that no player would ever undertake. Every year, a new one of these seems to be found, some in the most iconic video games of all time. Like these names were forgotten, so too are the worlds and times they lived in. There is a different way to take the line, "the whole world looked like this." While we always imagine a world to be massive, there was a chance that the actual size of this place hardly ever changed. As games evolved, the space around it simply grew bigger. It grew more depth, more complexity, more colors, better sounds, better music. A universe expanding around the center so rapidly that the definition of a world itself changed. It was a world, then a continent, then an island, one getting smaller and smaller as the universe surrounding it naturally started to contrast against its walls. Walls that went from the sum of everything to being surrounded on four sides, fitting in a frame within an ever-expanding frame. Now, its entry point has been stamped flat, only findable within a seam, inside a world inside a world. This expansion might stop one day, a depth reached that rivals something like our universe, but that day has not yet come. And so, this island and so many others continue to shrink in the picture that is the medium of video games, hoping that they can simply be held in a world big enough to keep it safe forever. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day. Do you find the relentless seeping dread from the decay of our freedoms, infrastructure, and social memory to be killing your soul? Well, my Patreon will not fix that. What I can offer is some semblance of community through art sharing in the middle of a lonelier and lonelier world. For the past few months, every single weekend, I've been hosting an event called Lakeside Chats, a Patreon-exclusive book club but for anything audiovisual, movies, television, and most often, YouTube. We vote each week on the day and thing we're watching and either discuss afterwards or just hang out and have a nice time. This week we all got to pick a video or set of videos up to 10 minutes in length and just show them off, everyone being able to share stuff they normally would have never been able to. If you're interested in such a concept or just want to support me financially as I reject almost all sponsors since almost all sponsors are utterly terrible, consider subscribing to my Patreon. Outside of the Lakeside Chats, we also have a Discord, one that anyone can join but patrons get special access in. Not only do you get a custom color, but also access to a patron-only chat as well as Ask the Judge, a channel where you can ask me literally anything and I will answer it beyond what should be a reasonable depth. Lastly, patrons get their names shown on screen and, if they pay $5 or higher, get their names shouted out at the end of videos. That being said, special Patreon shoutouts to Edmund Dong, MF Bitchboy, Owen McGee, Wayne Wheeler, Cat Called Blep, Lucky on Fleek, Beanie Guitar Guy, Damage43, Artelis, Supinato, John M, Dom Creative, The Fluffies, Oreo, Bestest Patron, Jacob Falk, Robin Michael Becker, Maiden Batter, Ted H, A Simple Lamp, Ro Ramden, Jocelyn, Owen, Gerberly, Fake Milk, Rudy Schubring, Peter Healy, Christian Cook, Celestial Tangle, Kevin Paulson, Poetry Stud, Necra, MC Logic Master 69, War Sometimes Changes, R2, JP Benini, Tricky Goose, Nicotina, Danny Miller, Crimson Aurora, Sistine Capella, Orange Dude 107, Umbrella, Truman Tietmeyer, Lucy G, Gus Wogan, Z Kong, and I Love Aqua. Seriously, thank you all. You have no idea how much this helps me every month. Not taking sponsors is more expensive than you might think. That all being said, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.